What's up fam, my name is Tech and welcome to my Mass Effect 3 multiplayer guide for the Drell Adept. In this video I intend to document my research on the class and hopefully spread awareness that people are still playing this game. Prior to making this guide I hadn't really played any Drell class before, but after playing a decent amount I find they are far better than I initially thought, especially if you find yourself playing solo. All Drell classes are intended to be hit and run specialists. They have increased mobility in the form of movement speed perks and acrobatic dodges. They can also sprint and use cover to full effectiveness. Their increased mobility comes at the cost of survivability as they only have 250 barrier by default. Their two passive trees come with a bit more spice than the base human classes. Drell Assassin can be spec'd for 15% more power damage or 5% more weapon damage than Alliance training should you choose to max it. And fitness can not only give more bonus health and barrier than the human fitness tree, but it also gives 20% movement speed. This brings the class to 900 health and 450 barrier before any other boosts. And also Drell have 15% higher power weight capacity by default. Now onto the active abilities. Your first one is Reeve. On activation it'll cast immediately at your crosshair location and it will hit any enemies not standing behind cover. On hit, it applies a damage over time to the target and those in the radius, and it gives you damage reduction if used on an organic target. It also staggers any infantry enemies on hit. The damage over time can stack with multiple uses, but the damage reduction can only be applied to yourself once. This ability is both a primer and a detonator for biotic combos, but it cannot detonate other power combos. If used on Guardians, it'll apply through their shields, and you can spec this to give up to 40% damage reduction, which helps a lot with your paper-thin barriers. Your next ability is Pull. On activation, you launch an arcing projectile that will lift unprotected enemies. By default, it does 100 damage on hit, but can be spec'd to deal damage to lifted enemies or increase damage to them. You also have the option of pulling multiple targets with rank 4 radius or one target longer with duration. This ability is a primer for biotic combos, but it only works on targets who can be affected by the lift, which only works on targets with red bar health. Because of that, it's probably the worst ability in the game, so I'd recommend avoiding it. With that being said, a fun fact is that it has the lowest cooldown of any ability in the game. Cluster Grenade is your final active. When thrown, it splits into 3 different projectiles that each follow a different path. Each of the projectiles can bounce in different directions, so it can be difficult to aim when you first try it. It's made so that at least one of the projectiles will always follow the arc of the reticle, so with some practice you can aim it consistently. The shown damage is per grenade, so hitting all 3 can deal massive damage. It's also a universal detonator, and each grenade can detonate a prime target, so the AoE potential with this is great as well. Do note that the rank 5 combo damage tooltip is misleading. It increases damage dealt to all targets affected by biotic primers, not just lifted ones. The damage increase also applies to the grenade itself, not the combo detonation. So how do you build the class? In my opinion, it only has one viable build path with a few preference choices based on the perks. It's a combo build focusing on Reeve and Cluster Grenade. First, max Reeve, taking radius, damage reduction, and damage duration. This combination of perks is not really debatable. Radius allows you to put the dot on multiple targets, priming each one. Duration is not as useful, as your cooldowns will be low. The final 2 perks are required because you can't miss out on 25% damage reduction being that squishy. You'll be skipping Pull, and then max out Cluster Grenade, taking Force, Damage Combo, and Shrapnel. Each perk here is preference. If you choose Force and Damage for rank 4, Shrapnel will provide more damage than Force and Damage. But if you choose Radius instead, Force and Damage does more. Drell Assassin is also preference. I tend to like weapon damage here as you don't need extremely low cooldowns with this build with only one ability to worry about. And much of your damage will come from biotic combos, which is not affected by power damage boosts. But you could easily justify taking power damage perks if you prefer them. And finally, take the durability perks for fitness. With this build, the weapons are preference, but in order to use Cluster Grenade effectively, you must be in short to mid range. Because of this and the fact that you want more grenades, I prefer any lightweight assault rifles with the Warfighter package. I've also tried running some of the lower weight shotguns with this build. The Disciple is a good choice since it's relatively mid-range and low weight. I would also try the N7 Crusader or the M11 Wraith if you have them. Both of them are relatively high range for shotguns while retaining their damage. And if you do choose to run shotguns, take the Shock Trooper upgrade for extra grenades. Drell Assassin also gives a weight bonus to heavy pistols, so those are a good choice here with the Commando package. You don't have anything to strip shields with, so the Acolyte is a good option. With this class, your main goal would be to hit a group of enemies with Reeve and then detonate them with Cluster Grenade. Because of its lack of durability and wealth of mobility, this class is best played in a hit and run playstyle. You want to be dipping in and out of doorways and cover while applying Reeve to grouped up enemies. Because the class has no inherent way to strip shields, the best ammo type in my opinion to run are disruptor rounds. You can also get some benefit from incendiary rounds by utilizing the dot damage bug with Reeve and fast firing weapons, but it will be less effective than with warp. I think this class is best against Reapers, but it's also surprisingly effective against Cerberus. Reeve inherently does solid damage to barriers and armor, but the fact that it's a hit scan dot makes it pretty strong against phantoms. Plus Reeve and Cluster Grenade also does a grip of damage to Dragoons. This class can be very selfish in that it doesn't really benefit other classes much at all. Playing with other classes can even be a hindrance. Reeve, unlike Warp, only detonates biotic combos, and it doesn't even provide any armor shred for teammates. Also, because you're reliant on having grenades for your damage, you can struggle when paired with other grenade-based classes. And with the main strength of this class being mobility, when you play solo, you can use larger maps to kite enemies around the perimeter of the map. When you play with teammates, this is much harder to do, because the spawn locations and enemy aggro is much harder for you to predict. With that being said, the best class to pair with this is a self-sufficient biotic class with no grenades. If you're looking for one of those, check out my guide on the Human Sentinel. If you like this video, please drop a like so the YouTube algorithm lets other people know this game is still being played. And if you want to continue learning this game with me, I'll be making more of these guides in the future. Later fam.